Hello and welcome to the recording of the second Women Lead interview hosted by me, Angela Clarke. Our next guest is Dr. Amanda Brown Bennett, a counseling psychologist, clinical supervisor, and describes herself as one who helps the helpers.
Okay, it's 7:35 and I'm going to welcome you all to our second in the Women Lead series. This is our second. And I'm really thrilled to have you here. Really, really great to have some familiar people and also some new people that I've not seen on here before. So the idea is that tonight is going to be relaxed. So please relax yourself. Make sure that you've got a drink. Make sure that you are comfortable, because this is about us having a conversation. I'm going to explain really the reason why I chose to start the Women Lead series. And it's because that for so long, we look to other people. We always look to other people when we're asking about role models and about people who empower and inspire. And I decided to use people that had empowered and inspired me on my journey, because we all obviously have a journey. We're not all in leadership, but we all are leaders in some way or other. But I thought what I'd do is I would use the people who have impacted my life and bring them on here and really just have a conversation about the journey, because it's important that and I'm saying as women, because although they may not only be women on this platform, but there is at the minute, but as women, it's important that we back each other up. There's too much negativity in the world as it is. And I think for me, it's about making sure that I raise the profile of people who are important to me, important in my life. And in doing so, the hope is that I leave a legacy behind for the people who come on after us, who are here after us. As they come up and they hear our stories, they hear our journey, they realize that actually we didn't just come into leadership. We didn't just arrive here. We had a journey, and that journey had twists and turns. But what it did was make us stronger. And I suppose what I want to do is also to highlight that in these programs and in the series is to give a voice, give recognition also to the work that people are doing. There are some women on this platform, some really influential women who are doing some amazing work, and you don't hear about it. We don't talk about it, and finding our voice is so important. And I've learned that. I think I've learned that more over the last 12 months than I have in probably the rest of my previous history, my previous career. So maybe that's why you're hearing so much of me now, because I'm used to being in the back, supporting everyone else, doing, and a lot of us feel like that's where we're best placed, that, I'll support you from the back. I don't want to be on the front. I don't want to be in the limelight, so to speak. But I don't see this as a limelight. I see this as a platform to hear the voices of people who have empowered, inspired, but also, navigated their way through life, holding on to the faith that they have to get there. And as I said, all our journeys are different. And today, I am really, really, really pleased to introduce you to someone who's really, really special to me. And I'm sure we'll talk about that during our conversations. But I'm going to introduce you formally as Dr. Amanda Brown Bennett. But I'm also going to introduce you as my cousin, who I love dearly. And the reason why I brought you on this platform is because you are one of the women who have contributed to me finding my voice and being able to speak, to really speak, from a place of vulnerability, from a place of leadership, from various different platforms, places, especially over the last year. And, we're going to talk about that. So, I don't want to say too much about that now, but it's been an eventful, inspirational, and empowering experience for me with you over the last year. And so I am going to ask you now to just say hi to everyone. I know we can't clap you. I wish I could. I'm going to clap you anyway.
And I want to clap you too as well, because you're doing some amazing things, you know, and setting some trends, and it's beautiful to see what you're doing and to be a part of that. And, you know, the same way that you're saying that I've been inspirational to you, I consider that an honor, because actually you've been a huge inspiration to me. And I think it's been great how this year we've been able to partner together and just challenge some stereotypes and do some things and create some waves, and it feels amazing. So Thank you for this opportunity as well. And hi everybody. First thing I'm going to say is please excuse the croaky voice. I woke up this morning and I just had no voice at all. And I've done everything I can to have some sort of voice. And I've been in several meetings today and I think it's kind of gone again. But, you know, I think for me, that was even more of a reason to say, you know what, let's do tonight, because, you know, I've do everything prayerfully. And one of the things I have been praying is, you know what, God, if it's your will, you know, just allow what you would like to happen tonight to happen, and to inspire somebody on this platform. So here we are.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Thank you. And you have on Zoom, I mean, yeah, it would be great if we were in person, but unfortunately we're not. We're on Zoom. So if I could ask to make sure that you stay muted if possible. I'm going to tell you this. We know that as good as Zoom is, yeah, it is temperamental. So if we freeze, if something happens, just stick with it, because we will get back. We'll be back. And I'm not going to worry about it. And if I freeze and Amanda's still speaking, keep going, Amanda. I will find my way back. So we're not going to worry about that. You have your reactions. So you can, you know, if there's something that you hear that you like, use them, you know, to clap, to whatever. If you've got a question or you even want to just make a comment, feel free to put something in the chat. If you want to know something as well, put it in the chat, because I've got a great team behind me, and they are looking at the chat and they will respond where they can and get the questions and comments to us. So feel free to do that. Okay, so I'm going to start then, and I recognize that I'm going to be gentle with you because I know that the voice is croaky and whatever. But I'm going to ask you really to just say a bit about what you're doing now, because let's hear about what you're actually doing now. What kind of things are you getting involved with?
Okay, so I'm a counselling psychologist, and I work with, well, I do several jobs at the moment. So I'm a clinical supervisor on a digital platform, and that's basically overseeing counsellors that support persons in immediate crisis. I've also recently been appointed as the chair of diversity and inclusion in the same team. Additionally, I am a service manager for what is called the recovery space, which again is for persons in immediate crisis that are sent to us from places like the emergency department, experiencing crisis but not needing hospitalisation, but still needing some sort of support. So we're open for them every evening, 7 days a week, for persons to come in and receive that support. In addition to that, I offer clinical supervision and church consultancies around psychological well-being, which is, I think, definitely my passion out of everything that I do. I'm one-to-one supervisions as well. And on top of all of that, I'd have to say my most favourite role is certainly being the mum to my 5 amazing children. That's Nathan, David, Daniela, Abigail and Hannah. And I am the wife of my wonderful husband, Jason, as well. So I wear several hats and have very exciting and very busy work life, a lot centered around crisis and just, you know, mental health and helping persons to recover from crisis.
You remind me of me. and that's the thing. I mean, as women, we really do wear several hats. And I feel that as time has gone on, we have actually assumed so many different roles. You know, it's not now just wife and mother. But I like there's something that you say about, you know, you care for the helpers, for those who care for others, you care for them. And I think what a lot of us don't do is care for ourselves very well in doing that. You know, you have, they talk about, you know, when you're in the aeroplane, you know, you put on your mask first and whatever before you help someone else. We've had to learn that. We've had to navigate. And actually, sometimes we've learned it the hard way. You know, we've burnt out first and then actually learned how to, you know, and I'm sure there's a lot of people on this platform who can understand that. We do so many things that, you know, so you have to wonder what day it is sometimes and what meeting you're supposed to be in. And we say yes to everything because we want to help, but not actually thinking about, you know, how are we going to get this done? We can't be all things to all people. So how do we navigate it?
You know, certainly. And yeah, you're right. I think to me, that is my passion. And that's why I love the supervisory roles that I'm in, because it gives me the opportunity to support. So from counsellors to pastors, to other persons working on the front line. That's the passion I have, to support them in what they're doing, because, you know, something that I say to persons that I work with even now, is very easy to, as the saying is, keep calm and carry on, because that's what you feel that you're supposed to do. You know, we wear these hats and it's, you know, I've got to continue in ministry and I've got to continue seeing my clients. And, you know, even in parenting, I've got to continue playing my role as a mother, as a wife, as a husband. We fulfill all these roles. And oftentimes, you know, it's, we have this sense of duty, you know, I've got to perform, I've got to do what I'm doing. And I think what's been really interesting in particular about this year where we've experienced COVID is, for the first time, many people who don't even usually associate themselves with being vulnerable have actually had to admit their own vulnerabilities, whether it's through the losses they've experienced, through sicknesses, just being exposed to the crises of others, losing jobs, you know, the various things that have happened to people. And actually, for the first time, many people that always just function, you know, we're high functioning people. And for the first time, we're reaching a point where we're actually had to acknowledge, you know what, actually, I feel vulnerable, you know, something that's hit us all. And it's, especially in our community, it's actually got us talking, especially in the church, it's got us talking. And it's interesting because before this period, I conducted a piece of research looking at how leaders, church leaders, how they manage the psychological distress of their congregation. And I think for me, the key thing in that piece of research was really trying to understand what it's like for those that are in a position where they're always having to give, and what happens to them behind the scenes. Because, you know, there's something that we call vicarious trauma, you know, so basically that's being exposed to other people's trauma, which we don't always appreciate is something that happens when you are in a position of leadership. And, you know, part of the research that I conducted, you know, findings said that, you know, actually church leaders or faith leaders are sought out more than GPs, more than psychologists, and more than psychiatrists combined, you know. And actually also part of the research that I conducted, when asking persons about why they went into the role of faith leadership, you know, some of them said, you know, it was inherited. Some of them said, you know, they just believed it was a God calling. Some of them said that they were asked to fulfill the role. Some of them just said, you know, they have a real passion for God. Or, you know, they said, oh, they felt they were a good teacher. But what all of them admitted was that nobody was aware of the psychological work you would have to take on, because you're not just fulfilling those roles, but you're also having to deal with people's emotional well-being. And then on top of that, you're also having to manage your own. So, yeah, so when you talk about, you know, me, you know, having the passion for helping those in the helping professions, that certainly is, I could go on all night in that area. Because, you know, it's that forgotten person, and something definitely very dear to my heart.
And it's true what you say, because within the church, what we have learned is you know, we've learned to pray for people. We do that very well. We support people, you know, as a group. But when it comes to actually dealing with, as you say, that those kind of psychological elements of your well-being, you know, I think more and more there is a realization that there
Yeah.
has to be a holistic approach to how we, how people are supported, whether they be in that church setting or whether they even be at work. You talk about vicarious trauma. And certainly I can definitely concur with that for someone who works in adult health and social care, and definitely through the pandemic, certainly the last year, not only having to face my own personal losses, but also the losses of my staff, the losses of service users, all of that, it does affect you. And as you say, so who does help the helper? Who does help those who are looking after the others? And I know that we've had many discussions about the importance of support, especially support for people who are in that role of caring for others, because it's draining. And no one necessarily, and no one necessarily prepares you for that side. You're not prepared for that. That self-help, self-care. You don't think about that when you're actually thinking about others. Your priority is actually helping someone else. It's helping them to where they need to get to, until as you say, we have to actually then take a stop and realize that actually we're vulnerable too. Not kind of, and trying to normalize the feelings that you're feeling, because it's different. These feelings are not normal. If you keep going, like I know I do, I just keep going. I keep going and I keep going until you can't, or until something makes you realize that actually you feel different. This is not normal. And people are talking about the new normal. But that new normal, I don't even think that we even know what that new normal is. I don't think that we realize what the impact is going to be. So, and we need to be ready for that. We need to be ready for that. So I'm going to give you a chance to have a drink and whatever, and then we're going to, because you are Dr. Amanda Brown Bennett, but you didn't start as Dr. Amanda Brown Bennett. So I'm going to probably show a picture of when you were younger. That's probably the place to start, your childhood. Let's start the journey process, I suppose, and really just talk about the journey for you. And I need to recognize, I can see that Michelle Johnson, who was my previous person on here, is with us. So I'm saying hi to Michelle, and everyone, just take us on that journey of, I suppose, let's start with little Amanda. Little Amanda. Yes. So Amanda, tell us about where your journey kind of began, really.
Yeah, so there's little me, looking all cute and innocent. I think my mum's on here, so she might chip in, I'm sure. But yeah, so I have my mum, my dad. I've been brought up in the church. I've always known the church environment. I was listening to a message the other day, and they were talking about the days of tarrying. When you'd go to church overnight and all those things. Yeah. I remember little me, I would follow my mum. I was pretty much like my mum's handbag. And, I would go to church with mum constantly. I felt like I spent a lot of time in church because my mum was doing a lot in ministry. I've always, I've known my mum to be the youth leader, to work with the children's ministry. I've known her to be the secretary. My dad's always been a deacon in the church. So I grew up very much around church and in and around. And even as a young child myself, getting involved in children's ministry, the choirs, the adult choir as, one of the little ones, as you did back then, and just, I suppose it was very church focused. I have 3 older brothers. I lived in quite a nice area. I grew up very well, and I had a lot of love and a lot of support around me. So that's sort of my beginning, I suppose.
And that sounds lovely. Sounds like a kind of lovely upbringing, lovely environment, at home with mum and dad and church. Yeah. And as you grew up in church, what was your feeling? What was your feeling about that?
I enjoyed being in church. Again, just the other day I was thinking about conventions, because we used to have church convention, and I was saying to my kids, once a year everybody would come from all the different, Birmingham and Nottingham and everywhere, and it was just exciting. You got to see your friends, and as I said, my life was surrounded by church, so I knew church. I believed in God for myself. I saw my parents who believed in God. My mum particularly was very passionate, and so I got to observe a lot of the work that my mum was doing. And as I said, I would often go along with her, and starting to try and find out who God was for myself as well, in those basic stages, through the stories you'd hear, through going to Sunday school and all those sorts of things. So, for me, church was a nice place to be. It was a safe place to be. It was enjoyable. It's definitely, something, although I'm not in that assembly anymore, I'm still in church, but I'm not in that assembly anymore, but I hold very fond memories of that, because I do believe it shaped me into the person I am, and that irrespective of the different journeys I've had in life, I do believe it is, that my faith has kept me, I want to say grounded. I don't know if I'd say that I was always grounded, but my faith, I do believe, has always kept me. And I do believe today is the very passion that keeps me going in all things.
And it's almost as if the foundation is what that foundation is what you hold on to. That faith that you had right then, as you said, it kept you grounded, irrespective of, you still, you had that link, you take your different twists and turns, but the foundation is what holds you. The foundation is what keeps you ultimately. So tell me what happened as you got older, growing up in church.
So I think for me, I was growing up in church, but sorry, one moment. I just need to cough, forgive me. Sorry. Yeah, so I was growing up in church. I was in school, and something I was thinking about the other day is where I felt I fit in terms of relationships. And I think for me, from early on, although I felt like I did fit in my family, in my household family in particular, there was always this thing of not quite knowing where I fit in other environments, and especially sort of socially as well. And it's interesting because where we lived was quite a predominantly white area. And so I remember being in primary school and, being one of the few blacks in the class. But it was interesting because they would often make little comments like, that's a strange thing for a black person to have a name like Amanda. And I just didn't know many Amandas at all. And then later on, I thought, it's an American thing. But what I didn't realize is they were sort of associated with, we don't really expect black people to have a name like Amanda. We don't necessarily expect you to speak how you do, because I know I'm sounding a bit croaky right now, but I do actually speak quite well. So, people would be saying, but you speak quite well and we don't expect it. So the few black kids that were in my school felt I didn't fit in, and they would make little comments like, oh, say it again, say it, and I'll never forget one time, I think I must have said something like, oh, I'm going to Streatham. And they were like laughing, they found it hilarious, and I couldn't work out what I had said wrong. And then later on it was like, no, it's supposed to be Streatham, or whatever it was that they said. But it was interesting because among those kids, it was like I didn't quite belong. But then I was also aware that I didn't really fit in with the other kids that were in the school. So I kind of felt like I positioned myself slightly outside. And interestingly, again, I think for me, it was all, people can be ignorant. But, also I kind of feel like it was the same thing in church, because although I really enjoyed being in church, I kind of felt like I saw my commitment to church and God a bit differently from my peers as well. So when I would follow my mum to different services and various things, especially if it was like tarrying and things like that, I wouldn't see other young people there. If I'd go with her to prayer meeting, they wouldn't necessarily, unless someone was dragged along, they wouldn't be there, but I would opt to go along. And so for me, I always, again, felt slightly outside. I remember being in the choir and the others sort of laughing from the audience, you know, when we were up there, and then the whole choir would kind of get in the spirit, and then you're stood standing there thinking, where do I position myself, you know, and the others would just be laughing hysterically, you know, and it was interesting because, again, it was like I always kind of felt slightly outside. And so for me, I always felt a little bit different. And also in terms of differences, I realized that there were certain life experiences that I was having as well that I felt made me perhaps mature in different ways than perhaps some of the other, you know, some of my peers and some of my family members. And so there were certain things that I was experiencing that I think gave me a little bit of a different understanding of life. And for me, then I started to have a lot more questions in terms of who I was, in terms of who God was, and, you know, what my life meant, where I fit in, who I was supposed to be. And so I found myself pulling away, you know, from social groups. Although on the outside, I looked quite sociable and I got involved with a lot of things. And people would often describe me as very happy and very bubbly. I was often seen as the joke. And I think when I started to have a bit of a spiral downwards, I think what people couldn't quite understand was how someone who on the outward seemed quite happy and quite bubbly and quite strong, you know, all of a sudden it was almost like, well, where's this other part come from? Where's this negative part come from? How comes you're, you know, experiencing some of the low moods and the depressions and the various things that I was also experiencing as well? So I kind of felt like I was in conflict with myself in terms of what I was feeling and experiencing. And then, you know, what we do as people, as women, as Black people, you know, as parents, what we tend to do is often suppress what we're feeling because, you know, we want to keep up appearances. And, you know, we don't want, you know, nobody wants their family or their friends to be concerned about them. So you know, you put on the face, you smile and you try and continue. And so I found myself trying to do that even quite early on and without fully really understanding why something else was happening. And there was almost like this incongruence or sorry, this, you know, sort of a mismatch between what I was displaying and what I was also feeling as well.
And that's hard, isn't it? It's because on the one hand, people may say, oh, well, you're just going through adolescence. That's all it is. You're just experimenting. You're just growing up. That's what you do. You know, that, you know, you're just being, and then other people just say you're just being downright rude. You know, you're bad. You know, because they, you know, people will find labels while you're struggling to find your place, you know, while you're struggling, you know, trying to deal with the competing, not priorities as such, but where am I supposed to be? Who am I supposed to be when I'm here? Who am I supposed to be? Well, I'm not accepted. I'm not quite accepted when I'm here. So who am I supposed to be? So instead of actually being yourself, you then begin to be what other people expect you to be, depending on the environment that you're in. And that's a normal process.
Yeah, no, it certainly is.
Yeah. So, okay, so that was, so you distanced yourself, became quite isolated, I suppose, and that was, I would say, well, they you know, self-induced isolation. You made that conscious decision to pull away. So to pull away from the church, or the people in church.
Well, I was still present. I was still physically present. Yeah, but emotionally, I was quite disconnected in a number of ways.
So it was almost as if you were robotic. So you went, you did what you were supposed to do, what was expected of you. And from what people could see on the outside, it was the normal Amanda.
Yeah.
And I presume, and you can say if this is inside, there was this warring.
Yeah, definitely.
That's how you felt.
Yeah, no, yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
So, okay. So how did you deal with that, or how did it deal with you? Because that's what happens. If we can't deal with something, it will deal with us. So. So how did you progress? What happened?
Well, that in itself kind of sent me on a bit more of a downward spiral. And I think what was interesting for me was there was a situation that happened in my personal life. And it was something that I hadn't exposed or explained to anybody. So as I said, I was living quite a happy and quite a normal life, and I really was. But at the same time, there was certain things that had an impact on me that only I knew about and I didn't feel able to convey. And I so happened to be in a class, and back in the day, I don't know what they're called now, but it was at the time called a PSHE lesson. And I remember the teacher saying, oh, we're going to learn about, different things that happen to persons. And, they were talking about all different kind of things that happen to people and what you can go through and the helplines that are available. And they were talking about, assault and various other bits and pieces. And I think for me, there was some children in front of me that were having this conversation. And I think for me, something triggered. And that's when I realized that actually what I was experiencing was what was being described here. And so I then took it upon myself to do as you do. And as a child, once the class was cleared, I did the whole, I have a friend, and, and this friend has gone through something. And, if I just want to advise this friend of how they can help themselves, because they're okay now, but actually I think, what you've said today could be quite helpful. And the teacher did give some very helpful advice. But what he also did is he said, are you sure that your friend is okay now? And I said, yes, my friend is absolutely fine now. And then what he said is, well, if it's possible, you could get your friend to speak to me. So I thought, great. And I actually went away feeling almost there was a sense of anxiety, but also a sense of relief, because it was like, okay, I'm finally starting to make sense of that thing that was within me that didn't quite make sense. And so I went back and I saw him and I said, oh, by the way, the friend is me, as if he didn't already know that. And I basically just said, yeah, there's certain things I've been dealing with, didn't know how to cope. Again, he gave me some wonderful advice and I thought, brilliant, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to live my life, everything's going to be fine. It wouldn't have to go no further, and that was it. Now, the difficulty is, if we look at things such as safeguarding and all of that, everything was kind of done wrong at this point. Because first of all, there should have obviously never been a promise of, it wouldn't go no further. It shouldn't have even really been the one-to-one. There was lots of sort of wrongs that happened, which then resulted in we're going to have to take this further. And I think for me, it was something that I felt at the time I didn't want to be exposed. I didn't want the situations to be exposed. But I was quite happy for it to stay as it was and just to allow myself to heal.
Yeah.
And I think for me, one of the difficult things was when, all of a sudden something is said out loud is very different than when it's within you only. And I think for me, when it was said out loud, and when, now it was a case of, well, we've got to speak to teachers and we've got to speak to family and various things. For me, there was not just a shame and a frustration, but there was a lot of guilt, because I also kind of, when you're carrying something, and believe me, I had parents I could talk to. It's not I didn't have parents, but I also think there was a part of me that didn't really fully understand what it was I was dealing with. But at the same time, I think there was a part of me that wanted to just protect myself and protect anybody, and so therefore, I think for me, it felt important to just manage alone. And I think for me, the biggest thing was the letdown of the school environment, because the school environment, instead of providing me with adequate support, what they actually did is put me in isolation because they didn't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
And then when I was in church, I found that all of a sudden the friends that I did have, I lost, and I couldn't understand why I lost them. And I remember even one point, just bawling my eyes out, and my mum saying to me, well, what is the matter? What is your problem? And I just remember thinking, but I just haven't got anything or anywhere to be, or, you're at school when I'm being isolated, and I'm at church, because they were like my two main places. It was school and it was church. And all of a sudden I felt like I didn't have any of those places. And so I struggled a lot. And I carried a lot of guilt with that. I then also left school, and then I left church. And so now I found that I had left both places that were there to support me. Eventually found myself in a different school. And if you remember what I said earlier, the original school gave me a bit of a culture shock because I was around persons that didn't reflect me. And now I came into this new school and everybody reflected me. But it was an environment that I really wasn't used to.
Yeah.
And I wasn't used to a lot of the things that were happening, some of the behaviors I was seeing. And I think I also took on a whole new character. And I think where I had always been, you know, earlier you spoke about labels, and sometimes people can see persons as being rude. And I never had that. I was good and I was calm and I was quiet. I might have been cheeky, but, you know, I didn't have a label of being rude or naughty or anything. I was never grown that way. And I didn't display those sort of behaviors. But when I started in this new school, I took on this whole new character, and I became that naughty, that rebellious, you know, I was doing things completely out of character, getting myself into all sorts of trouble, which then basically resulted in, just before the exams in year 11, being told, look, we need to kick you out of school because we can't trust you here. You're too chaotic, and we're afraid of what you could potentially do. So it's best that we sort of terminate you. And it was interesting because with my other school, what had happened is one day I ran away, and I just never went back. So it wasn't like I left properly.
Yeah.
And then obviously the church, I was in church, and then I got so fed up and I couldn't cope anymore. And then I found another church, and my mum just said, it's fine if you want to go there. So again, I just left. And then here I was in this new school. And now again, just before, I was told, you just can't come back. So won't be seeing you tomorrow. And so again, it wasn't a goodbye. There wasn't no closure. It was just, you know, don't come back.
Lots of
and my mum basically pleaded with them and said, look, please let her at least do her exams. Let her stay. So they basically said, we'll make provisions for her to do the exams, but we don't want her back on the premises for school, and we don't want her to come to the leavers do, so she can turn up, do her exams, and then quietly leave. And so basically that was what I did. So again, I didn't really have the closure with school. Left, I went to college, again, sort of forced by my mum. You'll hear my mum mentioned an awful lot. So I was almost forced because I didn't want to now go to college. I didn't really want to engage. My mum found a college, and I went to college. And I was there for a few months. And again, I managed to get myself in trouble. I was now on red report, which I didn't even know could happen in college. I thought it was a school thing. Got myself into all kinds of issues. And then I found myself pregnant. So when I was 16, I now found myself in a situation where I was now carrying a child, which created quite a stir in the college environment, because it happened to be one of the teachers, so one of the staff members. So again, I left. So there was almost like this theme of, I wasn't necessarily kicked out of everywhere, but that's how it felt. There was never any, you know, closures or goodbyes or anything. Something just happened, and as a result, I left.
Did it? Can I ask you? Did it feel as if you were, even though you obviously you left those places, but did it feel as if you were constantly being rejected?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, constantly feeling rejected and misunderstood, because I think despite whatever I was displaying, I still think there was a good girl on the inside that just wanted to do the right things. But actually, especially the older I got, it was more looking, like actually she wasn't just this good girl. I think my family saw that, that I was a good girl. But I think externally, school environments, even within the church, because I went into another church, and I think I was probably seen as more of a nuisance and a problem to other persons.
So did you feel drawn to go back into the church environment? Because, I mean, did you feel safe in that church in the church environment, or is it just familiarity? Or
do you know what? When I went into the second church, I actually went following a message that I heard. So again, my mum sort of dragged my brother and I along to church, and I sat at the back in floods of tears, because I now didn't want to be in church, because obviously I'd lost school and lost my other church friends. And I sat in the back, and the bishop preached a message, and he said, you know what, sometimes God is trying to pull us away from relationships and certain things. And we're reluctant to let go of certain things that God wants to separate us from. And so therefore there are certain situations that, in a sense, we're almost forced out of certain things and certain relationships because we won't just let go. And I think I reflected on, in particular, my former church and the friendships that I had. and how I felt really rejected, and I couldn't understand why I'd been treated how I had. But it was interesting because all of that drove me here, and in hearing this message, for me, it was like, okay, I need to know this God. I want to understand this. And there was something that drew me to that. And then I started to go there. And I think what was different about me attending church at this point, although I was still perhaps outwardly what people would call a mess, I was really drawn to the messages that I was hearing. I wasn't a person that was caught up in the hype of services. It was a very vibrant service. But for me, there was something in the atmosphere that I think was very freeing. And that's what I connected with. I connected with the freedom that I felt when the power of God would move. So even though I might have felt condemned, and even though you put your hands up and you want to praise, and then something's over me like, put your hands down. Do you know, especially like when I was pregnant and things would be like, you really want to be having your hands up. And, so the different things I was going through, I often felt a sense of condemnation. But then at the same time, there was a pull into the atmosphere, the presence of God. And often when I would hear those words, and I just felt like, God was speaking to me and directly to my situations. And so I clung onto, I can't even say the church or the church people, because at this time I was getting myself a bit of a name. And I didn't necessarily have a good reputation in the church either. But for me, it was like I was bypassing all the persons. As a young person, you're talking about someone who was 15, 16, 17. And I would go, by myself. And I would just sit there by myself and sit through the morning service, afternoon service, and the evening service, literally alone, because I just wanted to be in that atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. So you told us about your first child. Tell us about what happened with your second child.
So as you can see, these pictures, I look terrible, but as you can see, I've just given birth. So, in the first picture, that's me, my mum, and my first son, Nathan. And in the second one, that was me and my son, David. And I believe my mum again taking the picture. So with my second child, I had moved away from home, thought I could cope by myself. And I had moved in with somebody who was actually very abusive and very possessive. And the thing is, I saw the signs, I saw the early signs, but I overlooked the signs. I'd overlooked things like, so my mum would keep my elder son for me, and I would go and visit who at the time was my boyfriend. And, I'd say, oh, I've got to go now, because obviously my mum's had my son all evening, and it's now like, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and I need to go home. And he'd be like, no, you're not going anywhere yet. And he'd be playing his computer games, and I'd be sitting there saying, yeah, but I really need to go. And, 2 hours would pass, and it would be like 2 o'clock. And I'd be like, when I go home, my mum's going to be, wondering what's happened to me and why have I just abandoned my child. And there was lots of little things I saw and I didn't like, because it was like, hold on, you're not respecting when I'm saying this is what I need to do, or that I've got this son at home or anything. But I overlooked those things. And what actually happened was I fell pregnant for him and lost the baby, then fell pregnant for him again. And at that point, I left home and sort of went to live with him. And he had a grill on the door. And I mean this almost in a literal sense. Once that grill was closed, it was closed. And I was now trapped for just over a year in his home. And he was just very abusive when he would go to work. I'd be trapped in there between sort of the hours of 6 when he would leave to the hours of 6 when he would come home. Silly little things like he didn't like pork. So if I requested fish and, saveloy, chips and saveloy, he would come home with nothing. And I'd say, well, I'm hungry, I haven't eaten all day. And he would say, yeah, but you asked for pork and I don't do pork. And I'd be like, so why didn't you just get the chips then? And he'd be like, no, it's all right, I'll make you something. And at midnight, me with my hungry self, haven't eaten all day, and with my young son, I'd be waiting for him to make boiled dumpling and gravy, and it would come when it came. And, and it was a horrible situation. And one that I just, for over a year, I didn't feel like I could get out of. I was really isolated. I didn't really see my family very much. I was fortunate when my mum would take my son and give him some space. They weren't aware of what was happening. And, I remember even one time when my mum called me and I was actually in the hospital, really battered and bruised and sat with police officers. And my mum said, oh, can I come and get Nathan? I was like, oh, not today, Mum. And she was like, oh, why not? His cousins are here. And I was like, maybe we can do this another day. And all that was in my mind is if my mum ever saw what I looked like. And at this point, I think I was about 33 weeks pregnant. So the police were there to see if the child I was carrying, I'd lost the child, you know, or anything like that. So it was a really horrible situation to be in, that I only actually escaped because he needed some repairs done on the house. And because he needed the repairs done, he then said, you need to go back to your mum's. I will allow you to go back whilst I do the repairs. And as soon as the repairs are done, you know, you're coming right back. And I never went back. I never went back.
And you talk about your mum as if she's always been there, hasn't she?
Yeah.
Always been a kind of stabling force for you.
Yeah, definitely. She has. She's and it's interesting because I know sometimes people will look on the situation and think, if you've had such a supportive mum, and if your mum's been in the church, and if your mum's done all the things she's done with young people and with, you know, and if she was that great, you know, why is it you couldn't open up? And I think for me, you know, what we tend to do, and I think I touched on this earlier, we internalize a lot of things, and, you know, we feel the sense of, I need to carry this for myself. And I had a lot of self-blame and a lot of guilt. And I grew up feeling like I had almost upset, you know, the family, because, you know, actually we came from a very nice home. We had a very good reputation. And I always felt that my behaviors, my habits, me getting pregnant, all these things, I felt like, you know, actually that was blighting the reputation that we had as a family. And although my mum always stood beside me, it was really hard to actually just turn around and say, actually, this is what I'm feeling and this is what I'm doing. And I even remember actually being in school, and one time I did something very stupid and I threw something out the window, which ended up sort of smashing a whole roof below, but I didn't realize it was a glass roof below. Thank God no children were in there. But when they wanted to call my mum, I remember begging and pleading and crying. And they thought, they were like, what does your mum do to you? You know, is there a safeguarding issue here? Because they were like, the moment your mum's name is mentioned. But it wasn't a fear because my mum would do anything to me, because I've never had that fear. I've never had a fear of, oh, my mum would beat me or my mum would do this. I didn't grow up like that. Some would say that my mum spoilt me. And as a matter of fact, there are persons that have even said, oh, if my mum hadn't been so supportive, you wouldn't have gone on to have them children, because, you know, if your mum had rejected you in the first, you wouldn't have gone on to have two more, you know, which I did. I went on to have a David and then Daniela before getting married. But it was really difficult. And I know it's hard for my mum. I know it was hard for my mum when my mum finally did hear the various things that I'd gone through. I know it's probably even hard now. My mum's in here somewhere. And I know it's hard as well. And I think the reason why I'm even sharing this is because I want to encourage people to open up and for parents to keep supporting your children. Because you know what, when you stand by them, when they go through their go through, and when you don't allow the negativity of what others might say, or even the shame that you carry, because we do carry guilt and shame. Now being a parent, there's a lot I understand and there's a lot I see, and I have those expectations of my children. You know, and if my children let me down, I feel disappointed, I feel upset. And so I can look back now and I think, gosh, what my mum must have gone through. You know, there's silly little things such as, you know, my mum, I was a funny eater. And I remember she would go and bang outside at KFC when the door's locked and say, my daughter needs to eat something, please let us in. You know, me, if my child don't like it, I'm like, well, then you go to bed hungry. You know, I'm not that same mentality, but she would go over and above and beyond for me. And so, yeah, it wasn't for not having the support of my mum. So please don't at all think I didn't have that. But it was because I carried a lot of guilt and blame, and I didn't want to put anything on her. And I thought that by keeping it from her, actually, I was probably doing something for the good of her. I was protecting her by not exposing her to what was my reality. And it's something that young people do all the time. Don't be fooled. I work with young people and I'm constantly seeing young persons that are going through things and their parents have no clue what they're being exposed to. And, you know, I look back now and I do wish that I had been open and said, Mum, this is what's happening. Mum, this is how I'm feeling. Because I do believe that the same way she supported me, I remember friends said to me, are you sure that's not like your mum's child? Because your mum's buying all the clothes. Your mum's taking them shopping all the time. Your mum's always got them. You know, from that initial feeling of, oh my gosh, is my mum going to reject me for having this child? It then turned into a situation where, you know, my mum helped raise those children, you know, and done it with pride, you know, and there was no shame for me or for my children, who are very, very close with their grandma, even today.
Yeah, there's a couple of comments that are coming through. One from Rosie that says, "Thank God for our mothers," and that's very, very true. Because, as you say, you weren't made to feel shame or disgrace, and whereas other, I've witnessed experiences where the very shame and disgrace force mothers to turn their children out of the home and stuff like that. Jackie's also said, she said something which is quite important, that, you know, sometimes we internalize to protect others. And it sounds like you did that for a very long time.
I did.
A lot of feelings, and, you know, you didn't want to let your parents down, but it was how, you know, it was how you felt. Sabrina's saying that she totally agrees with you as well, Amanda. Children often harbor feelings thinking they're protecting their parents. So it's natural. It is a natural thing to feel, you know, that, you know, although it's not helpful, because we know that if you internalize, it comes out, it has to come out in some way, you know, those feelings have to, you know, and they will come out, they will seep through your pores. If they don't come out on your skin and cause rashes, they'll come out in other ways. Your behavior, you know, it affects people in very, very different ways. Now, we're gonna, I know we've got a few pictures to go through, and we'll bring the next picture up, and just want you to just tell us a bit about what that means for you. And as I say, I know that you're sharing your vulnerability with us, and I, you know, really appreciate it, from someone who knows, really knows pretty much the road that you've trod. I can totally understand it. So I'm going to ask for the picture to come up, and if you can just kind of walk us through the next couple of pictures, because you've talked about, you know, where your journey is, and even now we feel like you've been in a very, very dark place, but it got darker, didn't it? Your journey kind of got darker.
It did. Yeah.
Just wait for those pictures to come up, and then we'll see where we go. And thank you all for being online. Really, really appreciate it. Recognize that some of these things are difficult to hear. And what you're going to see next is a bit graphic, so just putting out a warning just before it comes, just so that you brace yourself. But Amanda's going to explain to us what this picture is. So if you can bring that picture up for us.
Okay, so yeah, this is you know, I know when you asked me for the pictures, I did contemplate a lot about this one, and actually I've prayed a lot. Over the years, not just about the picture, but also about my hand. That is my hand. And interestingly, some years ago, I went to a service, and the person who was speaking said, you know, if you've got certain scars and different things that you want God to heal, you know, come forward, and, you know, God will heal, God will take. And I remember thinking, actually, yeah, I want my hand. I want this healed. And as I was going to go up, I heard God say, you know what, that is your testimony. That's a part of you that unless people see it, they would never believe that part of you. Because do you know what? And I say this wholeheartedly, I thank God for how I look now. Because when I say certain parts of my story, people look back and they're like, no way, never. Because thank God I don't look like it. And I trust God that I don't feel I display certain characteristics of my journey. But there is a constant reminder on me. There are several reminders, many of them you can't see. But one of the reminders is my hand. And for several years, at least for a good year after the injury, I used to wear a bandage, and it would be to the point where, you know, when a bandage looks really old and horrible, and then I'd take it off and change it and I'd put on another. And I used to just constantly walk around with those bandages on my hand, which actually was drawing more attention to the hand. But what I thought I was doing was I thought I was disguising the hand. And so it's taken a lot for me to be able to be in a position where I can accept and even talk about really what's taken place. So I do this not lightly at all. But what you're looking at is what happened to me in 2009. So after, as I said, what was this difficult build-up? I've now got these 2 young children. I'm a single parent. I'm struggling a lot. I'm not really doing anything with my life. What I also haven't said is at this point, I was also drinking a fair bit, and I was also taking drugs. So I was on cocaine. I was drinking quite a lot, but I was doing it all undercover. So again, it wasn't a thing that people knew about. I took care of my kids. I would help sort out the house. I would make sure dinner was prepared for my parents when they would come home, and that the house looked good. When I got an opportunity to go out on a weekend, you know, I would leave the boys if I could, and I would do what I could over the weekend so that, you know, I'd almost take myself out of myself. And it reached a point, you know, I reached a point where I was often intoxicated in one way or another, and it could be in public, but people didn't know it. I would do silly things like be behind the wheel of my car. I would be in the middle of church, all different things, and I was still, you know, carrying out these behaviours. And 1 or 2 persons spotted things, and there were the odd times when persons would go to my mum and sort of say, you know what, we're a bit concerned about Amanda. Mum would pull me up, and I would, you know, no, mum, you know, it really wasn't that bad, and I just had this, and, you know, and again, it wasn't naivety, but my mum's always been a huge support. And even when people were saying certain things, you know, my mum would talk to me, and my mum was still very much supporting me. And so, you know, earlier you said that I didn't have those negative stigmas. I didn't from my family. I didn't from my mum, and I didn't from my dad, but I did have them. I had them externally a lot. And I do think that there were aspects of myself that other people were seeing. You know, I'd go to church and people would see some of these behaviours, maybe not necessarily know what was going on. But they were giving me all different kind of names. But for me, as long as my family weren't being hurt, and as long as my family saw me as being good, and as long as I weren't letting down my family, which is what I thought, then it didn't really matter, because I didn't care about anybody else. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't about them. That's what was my mentality. And so there was one pastor who was like, look, we actually do need to get you help because you are a little bit off key. There was one incident where I got so messed up in church on substances that my mum was called and found me in a pretty bad way. And I think that was where things started to open up, and people did start to understand what was happening. And between a couple of pastors, they were like, look, we need to get you in some sort of rehabilitation, give you the chance to recover from all of this. And it was whilst I was in, I went into an inpatient ward for a little bit. And whilst I was in there, there were so many things that took place. And interestingly, and I don't want to over-spiritualize anything, but something that I realized is that there was a female ward and a male ward. And they didn't have any space in the female ward, but before they hadn't had space in a male ward. So there was this black man in the female ward. And when I came, they had to move him out. And I remember we crossed in the hallway, and I never saw that man again. But I remember there was a thing, and I was like, I don't know if I want to go in that room. You know, it just felt really weird. And I think because he'd just come out of it, you know, there was this part that was like, is there anything left in there? Or, you know, and so I didn't really want to go in there. But I went in there, and, you know, I was starting to experience bits of withdrawal. And not only that, but what had happened on the outside was there was lots of rumours going around about what was happening to me and why things were happening to me. Persons in family or churches were calling the ward to speak to me because they wanted to know what had happened, and parts of those earlier stories that I mentioned, which led to this, you know, big sort of downhill spiral. All of a sudden people were putting their own 2 pence on it and what must have happened. And, you know, the story just got so big and it got so wide, and it was getting so confusing to the point where the hospital staff actually said, you're not allowed to take any more calls, because the moment you answer the phone, you completely relapse. So I wasn't allowed any calls. I was in isolation a lot. And then they put me on suicide watch and self-harm watch because they uncovered self-harm marks on me. And I wasn't allowed any interaction with the outside world. What then happened was I found that my mental health just started to decline. And when I was seeing the psychiatrist on the unit, they basically were diagnosing me with PTSD, which was the first time I'd heard of that, complex PTSD. So basically that's post-traumatic stress disorder. And they were saying that mine was very complex, that I had comorbid, different things happening to me. They diagnosed me with borderline personality disorder. All of a sudden, all these diagnoses were being thrown at me that I had no idea of, but in a sense were kind of explaining some of my earlier behaviors, some of the things I was doing. And so it was really interesting how all of a sudden people were now trying to explain me. On the outside, the church were trying to do their little bit and, trying to analyze me in their way. And I just felt completely lost. I felt completely lost and completely alone. And as I said, my mental health began to decline. And the only time they would allow me out was for a cigarette break. Now, I wasn't a smoker, but I became a smoker because it was the only time I could get out of the ward. So I would use that as an opportunity to smoke. And one day, a piece of the ash dropped on my hand. And it was a real strange, hurtful, burning sensation. But at the same time, there was this relief in it. And so what I would do, obviously all my vices had been removed and I was on watch all the time, to the point where even when I slept, I had to sleep with someone outside my door and the door ajar. And so what I started to do is I started to use those cigarettes to burn my hand. So what you're seeing in those pictures were where I would hold the cigarettes towards my hand and basically just peel off the scars, and obviously the flesh would be there. And that happened for a while and it went undetected. And then the hospital found out that I was harming. And then they basically said, you know what, we can't deal with you because, so here we go back to that thing of, this idea of me being kicked out again. So they basically said, look, we can't keep you here. And the only way we can keep you in hospital is if we put you on a higher support unit under mental health. And one of the pastors that they brought in said, no, please don't do that. We'll take her in. We'll give her a 24-hour suicide watch. We'll sort her out. So they basically said, okay, but you've got to take her like in the morning. So, I woke up the next day and I was gone. So I didn't complete the care that I was under. And I basically spent the next few weeks sort of between pastors. And it was at that point that one of them discovered my hand, which had actually gone black. And it had gone black because it had become now severely infected because no one knew the wounds were there. And I would cover it with sleeves. So obviously different things to get into it. And when I went to the hospital, the psych liaison that saw it was so shocked. He was like, I don't actually know what to do with you because I've never seen injuries like this. And they wanted to keep me and to have me assessed. And the pastor was like, no, it's okay. We're going to support her. And so, yes, I went through several months of having to have, so it was being treated as, it burns as if I'd been in a fire. I had to keep having frequent visits to the hospital for them to redress it until they felt that we were able to redress them for myself. And basically, so I started to redress them. I was getting support. The support that I was receiving kind of went downhill because I was under the care of the church, who then basically let me down. So various situations happened between myself and one of the leaders, which then led to a sort of safeguarding breach. And so they then abandoned me. And so that was just kind of me, my two boys, and then I was now pregnant with my daughter. At which point, like the prodigal son, I returned back to my mum, returned back to my home, because my dad was very instrumental too, and received support from them throughout the remainder of that pregnancy. I now had my own place to live. And at the same time, I decided I was going to uni. And everyone was like, look, you've been through so much craziness in life right now. And I think maybe we need to just think about, you looking after yourself. And I was like, no, I'm going to go to uni. And I went to uni and I did a degree in counsel. What you're seeing here is the completion of that degree in counselling. And then at the same time, I thought, actually, I'm going to go on a bit further and I'm going to study some more. and I went on and I did my postgrad in psychology. And this is how crazy my faith in God was, and my faith in my parents was, because I went and I handed in a check for uni that I had no money in my account. And I was like, by 2 days' time, I've got to have the money for this because I know it's going to draw. And I didn't have money for uni, but I just knew that that money would have to come from somewhere if I was going to do it. So, you know, I was doing uni, obviously, with 3 young children. I was a single mum at the time. I was still obviously healing from the past as well. And because I couldn't necessarily afford it, I still had to hold down jobs in order to try and help myself to get through uni. But then you still have to do placements, because in addition to, you know, paying to be able to go to uni, I also still needed to be in a position where, you know, I could do the hours that I needed to qualify me for the courses. So it was extremely difficult. And, you know, at the front of my thesis, I talk about God and my faith in God and how he, you know, is that strength of my life, you know. And at the same time, I talk about the role of my family, because my parents supported me through that time so that I could take out time to study. My kids were amazing, because it often meant that I, you know, had to separate from them in order to do the study. And then I I was reconnected with Jason, who is now my husband, who came along, and he was completely amazing because he supported me every step of the way. He was encouraging me to study. He took on the children. They're his kids. There is no step. There is no, you know, they're his kids. And he took such an crucial role in raising them and in supporting them. And between him and my parents, they basically released me to do what I needed to do to qualify as a counselling psychologist, which is the picture you're seeing. So you're seeing the graduation. And as I said in the picture, I said, this is all of our, you know, all of our doctorate, because we all did it together, you know, whether it was my mum sitting up with me at night because I needed to get the thesis written, and 6, 7 o'clock the next morning I was still there, you know, or, you know, having to stay in the building late with my dad working downstairs so that I wasn't alone, you know, and Jason basically just doing the complete mothering, fathering, and still working in order to allow this, you know. So in a sense, it was all of our success, really.
And it's lovely, and it's lovely to see, because you obviously went on to have more children with Jason.
I did.
You did. So that's your complete family there. It
is. So yes, you've got Abigail and Hannah as well, and you can see my mum and dad, and my mum with her thumbs up, and similar in my picture there, you can see me with my thumbs up.
Yeah.
But yeah, a really proud moment, a really, really proud moment for us all. And I think it was that integral moment. It was that kind of being able to look back and reflect over all those years and the various stereotypes I fell into, because there were many of them, you know, as a single mum, as someone who had gone through some of the things I went through, as someone who'd had some of the, you know, who'd fallen into such psychological distress, or as someone who'd been, you know, and had all those addictions. I shouldn't have been where I was. It shouldn't have been so, I won't say easy, because it wasn't easy, but it almost feels like it shouldn't have been possible for me to have had those achievements. And yet here I was, you know, graduating and having such an amazing family unit there to support me.
There was a raised hand. Lorraine raised her hand. I'm not quite sure if she wanted to she had a question. Did you have a question, Lorraine? No, can't hear you.
Sorry, I've done it by mistake.
Okay, no problem. Okay. Okay, so so the last year for you and I have been very, very busy. I think it's been longer than a year. But for those of you who came on later and don't know, Amanda and I are cousins, but didn't really connect with each other in the way that we have until probably just over a year ago now.
Yeah,
probably the best part of the year. And it was just so incredible how our journeys had been so similar, that we both psychologists and both studied counselling, had similar experiences, but really didn't, I mean, I didn't know, I definitely didn't know And I said it last time when I was on last month with Michelle, and I'll say it again now, that you know, one of the reasons why you're here is because you were very instrumental in helping me to find my voice at a time when, you know, I was going through bereavement, and multiple bereavement, not just one, and difficulties, and just not being able to articulate it or express it in the way that I really wanted to. And you then came and asked me to get involved in a project. So do you want to tell me about that project before we show them the video?
Yes. So, you know, that project was a pivotal moment for me as well. And I think for me, it was the moment where, you know, I learned to speak and I learned to challenge a lot of my experiences and my understandings of life. So what happened was, after I qualified, I immediately got this job. And this job to me was almost like, God, you are just so amazing. He provided me with a job where I had a really nice income. I was able to work from home. I was able to meet the prince, and I was showing him around offices. And I was like, look at that. You know, me, Amanda, you know, here I am in this very middle-class organization. And again, what happened was, a lot of those earlier feelings of, you remember I spoke about not knowing where I fit in, that started to resurface, because now it was like, well, hold on. Yes, I may have overcome some things, and yes, I may be a doctor, but actually I didn't feel like I fit within this workplace, this environment that I was in. And so I started to doubt myself a bit again. And I couldn't understand what I was experiencing, and I couldn't understand what I was learning. But it was almost like the more I was climbing in sense of developing, you know, my profession as a doctor and coming into this field, it was like I was noticing almost like a sea of white, you know, and I wasn't seeing persons that reflected me. And not only was I not seeing persons that reflected me, I started to learn theories that I thought, you've not considered culture here. You know, that doesn't make sense for our people. I'm going into hospitals and I'm seeing, you know, inpatients on wards, a bit like the one I was in, and it's Black people. And I'm going, you know, going prisons and all those sorts of things, and you're seeing the ethnic community. But why is it the services that I'm working and volunteering in, such as, you know, Mind and all those community groups, why is it I'm not seeing Black people there? The staff are Black, but I'm not seeing the clients Black. And the same thing with the hospitals. The higher up I went, all the clients were Black, but all the staff were white. And so there was this sort of discrepancy with what I was seeing and what I was experiencing. And so now for me, this was a new problem, because I was also aware of my experiences and the diagnoses and labels I'd been given and what I was seeing. And, you know, I saw someone put a comment about the imposter syndrome. And I certainly felt that. I certainly experienced, you know, feeling as though I was in this world that I didn't belong. And so I was now grappling again with myself. And one thing that happened was I was on the train to London to go and meet Prince William and Prince Harry. And all of a sudden this real heaviness came over me. And I remember saying, God, why do I feel like this? You know, what's going on? I've got the perfect family, the perfect job, everything's amazing. And all I could really hear is, but you're not accepting who you are. You think that by qualifying and by doing all these things and by gaining all this status, that somehow, you know, it changes who you are. And it does to an extent. But actually, I am still very much me. When I look in the mirror, I'm still that person, the one in that early picture we saw smiling as a baby, and that same one in those pictures laying in the hospital bed with the babies, and that same one with the hand injury. But what was happening is, you know, I was feeling like, you know, I don't want to be associated with that person, because now here I am, Dr. Amanda, and I don't want to be that. And especially in the world that I was working in. And so I was grappling with myself. And then, as we know, the situation happened with George Floyd. And at that point, my husband said to me, oh, have you seen the video? And I went, what do I want to see that for? And he said, why wouldn't you? And I said, because I see it every day. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, the fields I'm working in, the books that I'm reading, the theories that I'm following, it's all there, you know. And so out of that, I took it upon myself to write a very long email to my workplace, which, as I said, was this predominantly white middle-class organization. And I sent a very long email talking about the fact that we do not really show support for, you know, ethnic communities, not in terms of the workforce, not in terms of the service that we're providing, not in terms of our communications that we're getting out there. And I basically called them out on a lot of things. And I said, at the end of it, I said, you know what, I hope you hear my heart. And I said, and so I speak. And that was how I ended it. And the next few days, I still felt this stirring, which is where I then wrote this poem. I wrote a poem. I spoke to my cousin and I spoke to my son. And I said, you know, it would be really good to do something with this, not just have a poem, but, you know, broadcast it. But I didn't want it to just reflect me. I thought it'd be really nice. And my cousin said, actually, yeah, let's bring people in it and reflect people. So we didn't know how it was going to go. But what we basically did is we said, look, you know, let's put out an ad and see who wants to be a part of it. And I'll come back to this picture in a minute, because I think it might be better to do the video and give me a chance to get my voice. But yeah, so basically this video that you're going to see was born out of that experience.
It's interesting that Michelle is saying, bingo, things changed when I also accepted me and the fact I begin to love being me. Such an important statement. Can't hear the volume. Got to go back to the beginning, please. Can't hear the sound. I could probably say it off by heart.
Have you got the YouTube one? You know, the YouTube actual video?
I could try and get that. Let me see if I can. I'll try and get that. Can you try and get the YouTube version and see if we can bring that up and get? And I was going to say, have a drink and yeah, let us try and get the YouTube version and we'll try and bring that up. But have a drink and yeah, because I'm conscious you've been speaking for ages and but again for me being involved in that video and the actual poem itself resonated so much for me. And I said, you know, right at the very beginning, you know, that's so I speak. It's almost as if I had a light bulb moment because of the, you know, the experiences that I had through the pandemic. So it was really important for when you asked me, I was honored. But when I saw the end result, I thought, wow, so inspirational and also so inclusive as well. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to see it because it would be, again, I asked you, what would you see as a kind of main achievement? And, you know, and I would definitely say that, you know, the production, not of just writing that poem, but then having produced it as well.
That was my son. I've got to give it to my son. He worked tirelessly on that to put it together. And you know, you're right. That poem I didn't realize was going to be the freedom for me as well, because I realized I was speaking on so many levels, and for the first time. And I think also what was important, I realized I wasn't just speaking for me, but also that there was lots of other people and lots of other situations that I believe I was speaking into. And it was very empowering. And I think that even that poem itself has opened up so many doors for me in terms of opportunities. And it's helped me to, I've lost my voice today, but it's helped me to find my voice over this last year.
Okay, well, hopefully we'll be able to hear it.
How do we make sense of what is going on?
Taught of black pioneers who fought to effect change.
Whilst living in a society which constantly reminds me that things remain the same.
we make sense of what is happening?
Believing that we, the minority, have no alliance
As a privileged majority, otherwise with deafening silence.
How do we make sense of what we behold?
Social justice, the reverberated order of the day.
Echoing while spirit and soul are chipped away.
How do we justify the downplayed emotions?
It's okay not to be okay. The constant spiel.
When it's anger or hurt, you trivialize the pain I feel.
How much it tries to get who I am.
Encouraged to find my own identity.
But ultimately,
I'm stifled and trying to be.
how can we truly affect change?
To beat the system. To be the system. Make sense? But don't speak out about it. For that, there's no recompense.
How do we speak out for what is right?
Told.
Your voice matters.
You're entitled.
And we'll even provide the platform.
As long as you're our minion.
I invest in my future.
Told what I sow determines what I
I will reap.
When complexion and heritage
shows success is skin deep.
How can we be one another's keeper?
Unity and community, the very thing that we strive. Yet, my greatest fear
but my own downfall is captured live.
How can I experience the innocence of childhood?
When tonight the defining games that I participate,
surrounded by tragedy and trauma that I can't even regulate.
How can I trust in the system?
Made to believe institutions are set up to support me.
Where the dominant first world problems don't reflect my community.
How do we move together, dancing to one beat, living our lives in colour, when within the grays
are black and white, with stains we can't uncover.
How do we all love wholeheartedly,
Love wholeheartedly.
Live authentically.
live authentically,
Listen empathically.
smile infectiously,
And trust.
unreservedly? Can we?
Can we?
I need answers.
I need answers.
I need answers. We need answers.
Can we talk about it?
Can we talk?
What do we go to do?
Where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? Where do we go from here?
I have concerns. I have a voice.
I have a voice.
I have a voice.
I have a voice. And so I speak.
Wow, that takes me back. Because we then went on to actually perform that live, didn't we? Which was it was a great experience, really great experience, and it just shows your talents, limitless. Yeah, and I'm sure that you'll go on to do greater things. And there's one more picture, and I know we're coming close to time, and apologies about the sound of that video, but you can find it on YouTube, so please revisit it and listen to it. But the final picture that we're going to bring up is of your son, and he looks like he's lying in a hospital bed, and I just I was going to ask you even before we came on, but I said no, I didn't want to ask you. What I wanted you to do was tell me while we were on here. So tell me what's happened here.
Okay, so one of the things I was aware of in what you were saying about coming here today, and in talking about our relationships and in leaderships and what we do. I think for me, there are lots of things I'm doing. I explained in the beginning the various roles that I fulfill. And out of all of them, my greatest is being a mother. But I'm also aware that for me, there's always been this conflict, because I used to believe that I could be this full entrepreneur, businesswoman, and I could, be a woman in leadership and at the top of my game, and I could still fully hold down a family and do everything I need to do to, be the housewife in the house, because I very much believe in those traditional values as well. And it was, for me, so this picture you're seeing is my son in hospital quite recently. This isn't a recent journey. From the age of 6, so whilst all those other things were happening with me, my son randomly had what is called a hemorrhagic stroke. So, all we knew is he wasn't feeling well, complaining of a headache, took him to the doctors. They said if he vomits, take him hospital. He vomited right there. They said take him hospital. We were there. They did all tests, said nothing's wrong with him. We went back and forth. And then because I wouldn't go away, they said, we'll do a CT. And in doing the CT, they discovered he had a bleed on the brain. Completely random. My children had been healthy, couldn't understand what happened. No one could understand. And we had to manage this from the age of 6, whilst at this point I was still studying and various other things. And then at the age of 12, he started to develop seizures. So 6 years later, and all of a sudden these seizures came out of nowhere. And it's been really hard because, again, I work a lot. What I do requires me to be out of the home a lot. And so a lot of my reliance is on my mum, my husband, to do a lot of the child caring. And in all of that, there is that mother instinct of my child needs me. And I want to be there to support my child. But there's also that thing of, I also know that there are certain things I need to do. One, to support my family, and also in terms of where I believe that God is also leading me to. And so many different doors have opened. And so it's been real, in terms of when you were talking about, how do we manage those roles of relationships and of being a woman in leadership? It's hard. It's hard. And I think for me, because of some of my life experiences, I do think I'm resilient. I do think I'm very passionate. And I think because I know where I've been, I think I'm always pushing forward, because I know also how easy it is. I never look down on anybody's situation. And I'm also very humbled by where I am, because it doesn't take much for people to end up where they are. We look at people often, the homeless man on the street, the person that falls into drugs, the leader that falls, the pastor that does, and we're quick to blame people and to look down on their situations. But we don't realize that these people weren't always like that many times. All it takes is a life situation to knock you off. All it takes is that redundancy, that marital breakdown, anything, and you can fall from wherever you are. And so for me, I think, in order to keep grounded, I rely very much on my family and very much on my faith in God. And it's a matter of having to balance those demands, those situations of knowing my family very much need me, exactly as that comment says, but for the grace of God.
For real.
It's interesting. The last thing I'll sort of share, and not that I want to preach on anything, but I speak a lot. When I do get an opportunity to speak, I speak about Eutychus. And Eutychus is a passage in the Bible I didn't know very much of. And I think he only takes up 5 verses. And it's a very interesting story, because it talks about this young man, Eutychus, who's in the temple where, Paul is teaching, and he finds himself sitting on a window ledge, and he's tired, and he's in a well-lit room. The teachings are going on, and the scripture says that he was speaking all day and all night. And what happens is Eutychus falls out the window. And so he falls out the window and he dies a very public death. And so to me, in a sense, I look at that, and I often look at my own life, because, one thing we've got to look at is he was in the house. He was in the house where the word was going forward. And there was a whole lot of people in there. And all those people went in there, and they were either so focused on what was happening, maybe they didn't spot him sitting in a precarious place, maybe no one saw him falling asleep, maybe some people did, and maybe they just looked and thought, well, what's he doing there? Yeah. But what we know is he was sitting somewhere he shouldn't have been. He was in a vulnerable position, and then he fell. And he fell a public fall, which resulted in death. And it's interesting because when you look at passages of scripture, some say, he was taken up dead. Peter turns around and says, he wasn't dead. And again, when you fall publicly, is how do people speak over you? You know, what do people pronounce when you're in that place when you fall? And so again, I look at my circumstances, because when I was in that place, when I'd fallen, a very public fall in terms of school and in terms of the church, you know, it was a thing of, that was a very public fall, and it was a very shameful fall. And actually, you remember how people speak over you. You remember the things that people are saying. Some people write you off. There are people that write me off. And I don't look down on them negatively, because we can only see what we can see from our perspective. And so some people will look and say, my gosh, he's dead. But that's all they're seeing. But Pete says he isn't dead, you know. And he was taken up. And you know what happened? He was brought right back into the house. And, you know, again, I look at that and I see it as, I went right back into the house. We're talking about in terms of church, you know, right back into those circumstances. And, you know, what happens when persons fall and come back? How do we treat them? Because he must have had some shame, embarrassment, physical pains. Perhaps, you know, perhaps he felt emotionally painful. He must have experienced all kinds of things, but he was brought back into that house among those very same people that saw him fall. You know, and so for me, in closing, the reason why I will share my story isn't because, you know, one thing I always pray is, God, you know what, I don't want to be an episode of EastEnders. I'm not here for people to get popcorn and be like, wow, you know, or I'm not here to talk about how bad it was and how terrible, or to glorify that. It's not nice showing some of those images and saying some of these things. And there's lots of things I could say, but it's not really about exposing all of that, because I do believe that actually you can't heal by tearing other people apart, for one. And I also don't believe that we get freedom by also suppressing what we've been through. So for me, being here isn't just about, oh, let's just talk the thing. You know, I pray on it and I say, you know, God, if it helps to bring healing and freedom to somebody else, and if it helps persons to understand how to support their loved ones who may be struggling, maybe you've got a child who's playing up, you know, maybe you've got a partner who's playing up, you know, maybe things are happening in your own life and you've almost written yourself off. You know, perhaps, you know, you're a leader and you're looking at some people in your congregation and you want to be like, they need to leave. They're causing too much chaos in my church. And that happened to me. I was asked at one point to leave, you know, because I was causing too much chaos. And, you know, for me, the message is, you know, when people fall, that public fall, let's remember to look after them. First of all, let's try and spot people that are sitting in precarious places. Let's see them, identify them, and let's be each other's keeper. And when people do fall, because people will fall, let's pick them up, how we speak over them. Let's not pronounce people dead. Let's not speak into people's situations and write them off already. But, you know, let's see it like Peter did. Let's pick them up. No, he's not dead, you know. And then also, let's bring them back in the house. You know, let's allow people to realize that you don't have to run from church. You don't have to run from the family because of what's happened. Me and my mum, we got the best relationship right now. You know, I've actually moved back into a house, can you believe it, with 7 family members, you know, and we don't get on each other's nerves. You know, and we have a really close relationship. And that can only happen because there was that level of acceptance and of love and of forgiveness. Because she could have looked at me and she could have said, boy, you know, the things you've done, we don't want to know, you know, we don't want to bring you back in for the things you've done, the labels you've got, you know, but we don't home in on that. You know, they've been very much my support and my advocate. Same thing with the church. I'm in the church. I'm doing things in the church, doing things in ministry. I love to be in ministry. I'm passionate about the people of God and the things of God. And that's because after the public fall, I was able to come back into the house. And so, you know, as I said, I'm not trying to preach. I'm a voice at me anyway. But yeah, I just wanted to share that story, and I hope it is an encouragement to somebody that might be listening.
That's excellent. And we've had, you know, thank you so much. We've had so many comments, especially about that scripture, because you're right. It's not a well-used scripture, but it has taken the meaning of that scripture to a whole new level. And the message that you have for us as individuals and also for the church is so important, because at the end of the day, we are the church. We are the community. And it's not just about church, you know. It's about doing the right thing, you know. When it talks about being your brother's keeper, when it, you know, those are real things. Love in action. If your parents didn't show you unconditional love, then we may be hearing a different story today, you know. But God,
Very much.
yeah. And I really appreciate you sharing your vulnerability. Faith Brown, I know you are on. I would love to spotlight you, but I know I don't want to embarrass you, but I want to say that, you know, you are to be commended for not just being a mother, but also for practically demonstrating the unconditional love for your child that has enabled Amanda to be the lady that she is today. And not just a lady, she describes herself a child of a king, and that is Amanda, Dr. Amanda Brown Bennett. This evening, we salute you. We thank you. We thank you for sharing. And I don't even have to hope. I am sure that just your sharing has uplifted so many people online. You know, people, you know, anyone that, and you know, please, as Amanda said, this is not just about us just, you know, chatting. This is, we're here to, you know, to impact, to make change, to empower and inspire. You know, anything is possible. You know, anything is possible. You just have to have that faith and hold on and believe that it will happen. And also have people around you to, you know, who are positive influences. And, you know, through the experiences, you know, and because of the experiences, and despite the experiences, and in spite of the experiences, it is important. It is important to do good. It is important to love. It is important to show compassion. So important, you know. So let us build each other up and not tear each other down. I'm going to just read the last chat, which says, thank you for sharing your story. Your vulnerability is inspiring and encouraging. Many people go through difficulties and struggle with the why me, but your story is an exact demonstration of the positive that comes out of why you. God bless you. And we couldn't sum it up any better. And thank you for Amanda. Thank you. You know, your journey is just beginning, don't you?
Yeah.
You've got so much to do, so much. And I will be there with you side by side, supporting you. So thank you. And in the words of Michelle Johnson's book, continue to do great exploit, because, you know, that your path is already set out for you. So thank you so much. And, you know, I really do thank you, because I know when you woke up this morning, you didn't feel well. Your voice was totally gone almost. And so to feel, you know, to see that, you know, that his hand has been upon you to enable you to be here, and and definitely to do expert. We give thanks, and thank you so much. Thank you all for joining this evening. Just a couple of things to remind you of. I know that some of you may not be on Facebook, but we do have a Women Lead Facebook group. So if you're interested in joining that, please go on to Facebook and go to my website and connect with that. There will be a recording of this. So for those of you who've registered, you'll be able to see it again, which will be good. And next month, which I can't believe that time goes so quickly, but next month our guest will be Melanie Hamilton. So we'll be here on the last Thursday of May. So please, if you know anyone who you feel would benefit from this platform, then please just invite them, let them know. We'll be sending out another announcement pretty soon. Thank you all so much. Not too late, sorry to have gone over time, but we felt that it was important to give due time to this. So again, Amanda, my sincere thanks. God bless you and keep you. And thank you all for coming on, and see you at the Women Lead interviews next month. Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching the second Women Lead interview hosted by me as part of the Women Lead Network. My next interview will take place on Thursday the 27th of May at our normal time of 7:30 p.m. And my special guest will be Melanie Hamilton. Melanie is an accomplished speaker, minister, business owner, and her strapline, which I love, "Together we can make a difference." Melanie looks at the holistic person. For more information, you can visit my Facebook page at The Angela Clarke or visit my website at www.angelaclarke.co.uk.